You're watching Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Fresh Berhad's IPO for the Malaysian public portion was oversubscribed over 18 times. In the past few weeks, we've seen how the share price have actually performed on the Malaysia bourse, and we want to understand a little bit more about the company, considering that the last time I spoke to Fresh was about 6 years ago on a different network, on a different platform altogether. So it's a good time to re-examine the kind of performance, the kind of strategy that has been employed by Fresh Berhad, but most importantly, what's in store for them in the years to come. In the studio joining me is Mr. Loi Tuan Ee, the Group MD and Group CEO of Fresh Berhad. Mr. Loi, thank you again for taking the time to make your way all the way here in the All Asia Broadcast Centre in Bukit Jalil. It's true that the last time we spoke, Fresh was, I would call it, entering its growth strategy. There was some support from Khazanah. And of course, you were telling me about your business model. Even then, we sort of knew in our previous interview that this company is going places. And to see that Fresh has been listed and has raised over 1 billion ringgit, I'm sure there's a lot that is in store for us. Maybe you can talk to us through the IPO process. First of all, it's not easy to list at any time, but listing in a post-pandemic environment must be very hard. What were the thinking that went through in terms of trying to list this year?
Yeah, thank you, Ibrahim, for having me. 6 years ago, indeed, we have spoken on a different platform. Now, what happened is that this IPO really something that as we were planning, right, to way back, I think in 2020 when we were planning, at that time before the pandemic, right, so when the pandemic hit, we were thinking that, should we proceed or we should actually relook at it. But then again, what happened is that what we realized that our business was pretty resilient, even though as we were going through that pandemic, what we realized that the business are very, very strong, and we are not actually suffering anything. On that basis, we still go ahead, notwithstanding the market was quite shaky. People don't know what to expect, something very new, and thank God, the preparation was indeed very, very tedious, right? The compliance and all this sort of thing. So, and finally, last March 22nd, we finally make it to Bursa, yeah.
I just want to learn more about how you're going to use the funds now that you've raised it from the public.
Yeah, I think the fund, the company in total, I think we raised about 1 billion, out of which about 300 million goes to the company. So I think as per our prospectus, there's a lot of budget is actually going to the expansion in Malaysia, as well as our regional expansion, particularly to places like the Philippines and then our Australian plant as well. So what happened is that I think the coming months, our typing processing plant need to be activated in few months' time, and then we're actually scaling more the local fresh milk productions in terms of we needed a lot of raw milk, right? So this is something that all this budget was actually go to expand the operation, and then also Australia we need to raise our capacity as well, and because it's very strategic, Australia serves as a backbone for Malaysian growth in the sense that however much milk we produce in Malaysia, we can't cope up. So we have to rely on Australian plant to actually send back. In the past, we are buying from outsider. So now what happened is that it is not like milk powder. Milk powder you can buy from anybody, right? Because it's a global commodity. But when you want to go to buy fresh ingredient, you only got a handful of players. So consequence to that, we are very reliant on some of these other supplier that poses a risk to us, that therefore we actually set our own plan. So since last year, we are 100% self-sufficient already. Okay,
let's talk a little bit more about the business per se. You were talking about relying on Australia as being the backbone of your supply. There's also that issue of demand continuously coming in despite the pandemic, despite the slowdown, despite economic woes that many of us in the market is actually experiencing. This is indeed an essential product. Everybody needs milk. In fact, my cafe latte requires milk as well. What would be some of the mitigation factors that you have put in place during the pandemic to ensure that your operations are continuing to go on without any disruption? And how critical is this Australian supply into your ensuring that your supply chain is not disrupted?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things during the midst of the pandemic, right? I think number one, during that point of time, I think we will have to ensure that our products are very, very perishable. So our people need to be safe in the sense that that we're putting a lot of effort to ensure that all the workforce, we do not have flare out in our plant, and consequent to that, we need to shut down our plant, for example, for a week or whatever it is. So we thank God we go through that period without any incidences of our plant being locked down. Despite that, we got about 500-600 people working across the few manufacturing site as well as the farm. Now, what actually we faces was the disruptions in supply chain. The imports, let's say, coming from Australia, material that coming from other part of the world, the packaging material that we need to import, the ingredient. So that one, I think, does give us a bit of a headache. So over the years, I think last 1 or 2 years, we have to work very hard to ensure that all these are properly planned in such a way that inventories are correct. Because the last thing you want, you're running out of ingredient or you're running out of that ingredient, so the plant cannot operate, right? So I think our teams are very vigilant in that sense as well. So far, we never run out the situation that that you go to supermarket, you can't find farm fresh product, for example, that because our shipping agent not able to ship in the ingredient. Now, the other problem that we face, I think, during this course of period is notwithstanding that we're able to, to ensure that all are in place, but the cost pressure is something that we cannot mitigate in the sense that because material price goes up, corn grain price goes up, literally everything goes up, with the impacts of, the commodity price rises. Not only that, but also the freight costs also increase significantly. So by doing that, I think what happened is that last year we did pass through a bit of price increase, to mitigate those headwinds that we are facing. Yeah.
It's important for us to talk more about the cost pressures right now. The Department of Statistics last week introduced or announced the inflation rate for Malaysia. It's up, headline inflation is up 2.2%, but that doesn't concern me too much as opposed to the food inflation rate and raw materials resulting to food. Prices like milk, prices like raw materials like corn. And we're talking about these prices pushing the production cost high, resulting in, I suppose, end users like me having to pay more for the products, right? Now, I haven't been paying attention to milk prices, but eggs, for instance, a whole batch of eggs I used to pay 6 ringgit 20 cent. Upon checkout, I paid 8 ringgit 40 cent because I wanted to buy just the eggs. That caught me by surprise because that's the only one price I remember in my basket of goods, right? And my wife texted me and said, okay, buy the eggs at Speed Mart 99 before you head home, so just before. And I thought, if this single line item is up 20% or 25%, I can't imagine the rest of my shopping cart, right? How do you manage this situation where, you need to manage your cost pressures, but also maintain your margins, but still remain profitable? It's a strange thing to ask you because I know you don't like raising your prices regardless, but it's a must, right?
Yeah, indeed. I think, Ibrahim, I think you are right. I think the headwind that we face, is unseen. It's something that it comes very, very fast. It happened very fast, and then the quantum of increase is also very significant. Look at grain, for example, corn grain. It used to be 800-900 ringgit a ton. Today you're talking about 1,005 to 1,008. In fact, the other day after the Ukraine war, it goes up to about 1,009 as well. So it's really painful.
So it's 300% increase.
Yeah, almost double, almost double. They're from 800-900 to almost 1,008, so almost double. So you can imagine being farmers, right? Because that grain, not only the corn grain, the soy meal, everything price goes up. PKE, palm kernel, for example, all goes up. So that itself actually faced a very high impact on us in a sense. The diesel price, last year, this time diesel price was 150, 170. Now it's almost 3 ringgit 50 cents, 3 ringgit 40. So everything is almost in that impact. But what happened is that last September, we actually passed through only a 5% price increase to our customer to mitigate some of the cost that actually rises last year. So this year, if the situation don't improve, and chances likely that with the Ukraine war continue to grind on, right? I think that the cost is unlikely to come down. So we are planning that if situation doesn't ease off, for example, maybe in July we'll probably have to raise another 5%, but not to the quantum like 20-30% and things. It's very, very marginal. So if you look at Farm Fresh over the years, we work very hard in terms of improving our efficiency, improve our wastages, for example, in the plant, and that ensures that how our distribution network, planning route to market, to optimize all those delivery and to bring down our cost, for example. But with all those savings that we are able to harness, right, that is why the direct impact on the bottom line is not as severe as it is. So we hope we continue to grow our business, churn out more volume. Our margin may compress a little bit, but overall the company is still very profitable. That's what we wanted to achieve. Yeah.
So your OPEX is being managed because of better efficiency, and you're using better technology to ensure that higher yield is managed, less wastages, margin is still being compressed. The issue here is on how do you improve your company moving forward? I'm pretty sure your CAPEX spend has to increase, right? We're looking at R&D, we're looking at better yield moving forward. I'm sure these are the kind of expenses that you need to spend on, not just OPEX, but the CAPEX part.
Correct. I think the CAPEX remain, as I say, dairy industries are very capital intensive. Like our Taiping farm, right? Now we have really put out 4 barn with a plant, and then we're going to put out another 2 more barn. And in Muazzam, we're adding capacity as well. So not only that you invest more on your upstream, but you also have to invest on your midstream. For example, this. Coming June, we're installing another UHT line and things like that. So the upstream expansion itself is very capital intensive, but we also have to put on the additional midstream processing, additional processing line. So what we hope that as we grow our business, we can increase the volume of business that we churn, right? So even the margin compress a little bit, overall profitability of the company is still intact. So we hope that by the year end, for example, things are a bit more subtle down, right? So it's more manageable. So that's what we plan. Coupling with the new product launches and all this sort of thing, gaining more market share. Those are the things that I think will add on to the overall improvement of the company performance. Yeah.
Another element is, of course, the ringgit performing very low against the USD. I'm sure this is creating FX losses on your businesses, not just in Australia particularly, but of course other places like Philippines as well.
Correct. I think our ringgit is definitely not helping as well, right? So you have the cost price as in absolute price increase.
Yeah. In country cost price higher.
Yeah, and then
you have to subsidize more because of the FX loss.
The FX and all this sort of thing. So as the currency continue to weaken, so all this add on to the burden to the company. I think that's very true. Yeah.
Any mitigation on that one?
I think forex rate is quite hard as well. Of course, we do hedge a little bit, just to ensure that we mitigate the risk in the sense that, like now, for example, we procure a fair bit of ingredient coming from our Australian processing plant, right? So the Aussie dollars, the Aussie dollars are also strengthening as well. Yeah, we do hedge as well, but these are the things that sometimes in business you have to learn to live with it. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. In living with it, we'll take one short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Farm Fresh Berhad. We'll be right back after these messages. All right, welcome back. This is Notepad. I have with me in the studio joining us is Loi Tuan Ee, the Group MD as well as Group CEO of Farm Fresh Berhad. It's exciting times, I have to admit. 6 years ago, when we interviewed you for the first time, it's always interesting to see companies that we thought could have been dominating the market already. I mean, dairy, right? Everybody drinks dairy, but somehow or other, the entrepreneurs of that time did not make it, as well as you guys did. And of course, 6 years on, this is where you guys are. It's exciting times because, as with any other company that has just gone public, the growth excitement is there. People inside your company is pretty much excited to see what's next. But because of it being listed, like it or not, the scrutiny is now moving in. Analysts are now writing about your company, and in a way, putting your company in a microscope that you haven't seen before. Because of these new elements brought into the business, and talking about the cost pressures and all the other business pressures that we're talking about, the market still is buoyant, and I'm pretty sure the market still wants your product. I certainly do. How do you manage this new environment, considering that these are the new experiences that you're feeling for the first time, being under scrutiny, market pressure, and of course demand is still there. Very strange times.
Yeah, Brian, I think being the listed company today, it does give us a difference, put the company into a different landscape, right? Particularly, you know, when you have all these big fund managers investing into your company, obviously, you know, they have expectation, right? So this is one thing that we need to manage the expectations, right? And then the governance side, in terms of the ESG governance and all this sort of thing, there's a lot of people also have expectation on you, you know, as to if you grow your company, right? How responsible are you, for example, right? How you treat people, how you run the business, for example. So all these things are unlike when you're a private company, you're only answerable to yourself and maybe a couple of partners and things like that. But today it's very, very different. Anybody can actually just write in or call, give a phone call, ask us for for explanation, for example. So I think the analyst, from the analyst standpoint, investor, right? You know, they are obviously, these are numbers people, right? They are very, very conscious about your numbers in terms of whether your growth, about your margin compressions and things. How do you mitigate it and things like that. So these are the things that I think, from the company standpoint, I think we really need to jiggle this a bit of balancing, in a sense that as much as I wanted to increase the price, for example, right? But we also have to be mindful in the sense that, you know, consumer interests, they have been supporting us for such a long time, right? You know, we are mindful of that as well. So on one hand, you have the stakeholder, that they're investor. On the other hand, you know, the customer, and of course our employees as well. So
you're talking about the S in the ESG, to be frank. I'm
right,
realizing that part now.
Yeah, correct. So in terms of pricing, right, I think what we realized that, you know, if you go to Farm Fresh, you go to supermarket, you know, our fresh milk, for example, we are still, you know, like around more than 10% cheaper than our competitor. Why so, right? Because when they push out the price increase, we are trailing them. All right, and today we are still behind it. So if really the cost pressure are not going to improve over the next couple of months, then I think it's only fair for us to actually put through another, you know, a few percent price increase to make sure that, you know, our margin didn't compress further in that sense. So I think it is a bit of balancing that, you know, you have to manage that. Yeah.
There's a couple of reasons why I'm rooting for Farm Fresh Berhad. Actually three. The first is consumer company. I love consumer companies. I think they move the needle when it comes to trying to build a better, equitable, capitalistic economy. The second, of course, we're talking about essential products. I think dairy products are actually critical, not just the milk itself, but the dairy products related to it, anywhere from cheese to any other stuff in between. But the third element on why I'm rooting for Farm Fresh is, of course, it's founder-led. You have been in the company for quite some time, and the fact that you are still in the company and hold equity and you know, brought it from where it was before to where it is now, the bet is strong for Farm Fresh as long as you're there. Then that whole issue of sustainability, not just the sustainability of doing business, but the sustainability of you leading the company. I'm sure some form of succession planning is in place. Being an entrepreneur at not a young age is also quite interesting. There's a lot of elements that I want to ask, but I don't know whether I'm going to be politically correct to ask these kind of questions, because it's easy to ask a young entrepreneur, you know, what's next, and then you can imagine he or she can grow with the company. But what would be some of the plans or thoughts that you have when it comes to succession planning and ensuring that governance is being installed and restored in the company, considering that this is a public listed company? We want to see the longevity of it. So how are you thinking about this point?
Yeah, I think if you look at Farm Fresh, I think, Ibrahim, I think number one, I think how we actually does well over the years, right, over the last 1 decade, Malaysian consumer continue to love us for our value. I say when we say that, you know, we truly, you know, believe in the well-being of our customer or their health, for example, as a core value of our company, how we operate and how we govern our company. So that is very important in a sense that, because this is a customer promise, right? It's like we have to ensure that number one rule is that we have to keep our promise, however big we grow, right? These are the people who supported you based on your promise, right? And then you have to keep that brand promise. So what I realized that over the years, there are many big brands, right? They, after 10 years, to 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years, they actually depart from whatever the brand promise that the founder actually started. So that is very dangerous. So the most important part of the transitions, right? If the company have grown based on this promise, the consumer trusts you, the mama trusts you, then you make sure you keep that promise. That is very, very important, whoever that take over my job. Now, Farm Fresh, I think it's very institutionalized, right? It's not a family-run company, things like that. You know, my children, my daughters, my brother-in-law, my son-in-law, and things like that, a whole bunch of family. It is not like that. So it has always been managed in such a way that it's very merit-based. You have to be good at what you're doing, all right? And therefore, you know, we entrusted the job to you because we are not competing with small fry, right? We are competing with all the multinational giants. So the team that we have in our company has to be the best. You have to be very, very good. You have to be very passionate in what you're doing, whether you're looking after the cow or you're in a processing plant, you know, ensures that, you know, we produce the top-notch qualities, and then the R&D development people have to be aware what is the company vision and the mission, what kind of product that you need to develop, right? You cannot be develop something that, you know, that you make money, but it's not good, healthy for your kids, for other people's kids. Now, the industry itself has got a lot of challenges. The food chain today, if you look at the whole food chain, right, there's a lot of problem in our food, particularly the food that's given to the kids, for example, right? You know, particularly let's talk about, you know, ground milk, for example. There's so much of sugar in there, and it's very, very harmful for the kids. Now, if that one don't correct, it's gonna create a lot of health issue for the kids that grow up at the tender age of 1 or 2 years old. You are pumping them that amount of sugar. Imagine, you know, when they're growing up, you know, to 10, 15 years old, you know, the health complications. So I'm of the view that, you know, our company succession plan, we have very, very able people. You know, the company obviously have to precede over me, right? You know, in the sense that the brand, the value that we have. So as long as the, you know, you have competent people, passionate people, that we are able to bring up the next bench, you know, that they're able, with or without me, I don't think so. I think the company will move on as it is. The most important thing that if you don't depart away from your promises, then I think the brand will continue to thrive. Yeah.
Sometimes the company can't help themselves, honestly. I've seen founder-led companies over 3-4 decades, they forget. And I think that's the main point that I'm trying to drive at, to ensure that your brand promise that you initially set on carries forward through time.
Exactly.
I think that's the most difficult thing. I think cost pressure and all the other stuff, I think you can handle. But this one is a bit tricky because outlasting you is a legacy that you need to think about.
Because you see, Ibrahim, what I noticed is that sometimes, you know, being a PLC company, it is always tempting, right? You know, when you see that, you know, when you have cost pressure, you increase the price, but if you cannot increase the price, chances that, you know, your margin compress. And the next thing is how to cut costs. But if you choose to cut costs on the ingredient that you promise your customer, then I tell you, it's going to haunt you. Someday you're going to come back to haunt you, and then without you realizing that, short term you actually gain a bit, but longer term you're going to lose them. So
but that wisdom normally comes with age, honestly. I'm not talking about just Asian culture and all this. Honestly, that patience is something that I've seen young entrepreneurs also have the kind of wisdom. I've seen you know, not so young entrepreneurs not having the wisdom also. I understand that. But yes, I understand the need for us to actually appreciate the fact that the promise that you give to the customer, the value is the only value that you bring to the market.
Exactly.
So we don't have much time left. My final question is this. I don't know whether you've been asked this before in all your interviews, but in the process of inspiring others, particularly the young, on appreciating your business, do you think that one of your areas can be turned into a tourism area? Like, for instance, when I brought my kids to the Holstein farm milk, the dairy farm milk in Kundasang with the Desa Dairy Farm, I think your competitor, I suppose. But that was the first time that my young children saw what it means to make milk. They just drink it from the supermarket, right? But they saw how smelly things are. They saw how the cows are being treated, and then they see the bull resting, and you know they always make joke. Wow, the bull has nothing else to do, but you know, and then all these cows are for them. I said, it's not so easy, you know, because if the bull can't perform, game over, you know, and it's an interesting conversation, right, to have with young children. But do you think that this is an opportunity for you to explore some tourism
no, Ibrahim,
aspect to this?
In fact, I'm glad that you brought this out. In fact, if you can, I would like to invite your kids and your family to our UPM farm.
I would love to go.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually UPM farm has got a very, very nice property. You know, you cannot even imagine how big is the tree, right? It's beautiful farm. So what we did is that we do a collaboration. The UPM, they call it the industry ICOE, you know, excellent in the campus. And we actually developed that. In fact, it was ready almost like 2 years ago, but because of the lockdown again, we never actually opened up. We maintain the place. So what we intend to do is that end of next month, we're going to open to public. It's very nicely done. When you go into that farm, you will see how dairy animal, the calf milking, and then not only that, we go beyond that on how we manage the waste, for example, and then we do some organic vegetable and fruits growing as well, and then a bit of petting zoo with some nice tractor ride around. So it's very, very educational. And then we have a cafe. In fact, that cafe now we open for buka puasa, right? And it was very well received. People go there, they just love it. So I think this is where the place that we would think that in the coming years, we are going to drive in a lot of school children, and that will, I think will accrue a very big branding value for Farm Fresh.
I agree, and also inspiring others, because not just the community builder, but inspiring the young as well.
Yeah.
Again, just like the last time, we ran out of time too fast, but this is another excuse for me to do the interview with you at the UPM farm. Why not, right? In a few months' time. That was Mr. Loi Tuan Ee, the Group MD as well as Group CEO of Farm Fresh Berhad. We have all these kind of resources on the website. Just head on to astroawani.com, look for Farm Fresh there, or look for Notepad. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.